To one and all, and welcome to yet another session in this series of panel discussions we are having with eminent thought leaders from the industry. This session is titled Importance of Discovery Phase in a Cloud Modernization Journey. I'm your host and moderator, Pradeep Kirtivasan. I'm a solution consultant and sales enablement lead at Aspire. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the panel members. We have Rob Brindley. Rob is a director at ISG and an advisor helping several large enterprise customers in their cloud transformation program. He has been associated with well-known companies like DuPont, Citigroup, ABN AMRO in his previous roles. He's joined from Maryland, the US. Welcome, Rob. Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
afternoon.
Thank you very much.
We also have Sohan Maheshwar. Sohan is a thought leader, AWS ambassador, and developer advocate with Amazon Web Services. He was part of a team that built the Alexa ecosystem for Amazon India. Sohan has joined in from the Netherlands. Good afternoon, Sohan.
Thanks for having me, folks, and yeah, glad to be here.
And last but not the least, I'm delighted to invite my colleague Jyoti Rangarajan. Jyoti is a principal architect. She heads the cloud practice at Aspire Systems. She's the brain behind Texelo, an award winning cloud based multi tenant SaaS enabling accelerator. The session will be for about 45 minutes, followed by which the panel members will be, fielding questions from the participants. So you would see a chat window somewhere in your screen. Would request all the participants to type in the questions and the panel member to whom they would like the question to be addressed. So we'll kickstart the discussion. I would like to start with Sohan. Hi, Sohan. The top three cloud providers, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, along with the likes of Alibaba, have been there in the industry, as early as 2010. Uh, the overall industry was around 12 billion back in 2010. There was an inflection point around 2014, and then since then the industry has seen an exponential growth with the current market somewhere around 150 billion dollars, and predicted to hit 600 billion by 2025. uh, you would know Amazon or AWS has been the leader with about 40% market share. Would like to hear from you how the cloud landscape has evolved and how has AWS transformed itself during this evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you rightly pointed out, the cloud has evolved in the last 15 years or so, and AWS has played a big role in how it has evolved. I mean, just think back to about 15 years ago, right? We had companies who would advertise that, hey, we are cloud first. And now every new app or business out there, we assume that it is cloud first. So that's how much it really has evolved. And it's interesting that we celebrated 15 years of S3 and a couple of other AWS services this year. And in that 15 years, we've seen so much change. Just like taking price, for instance, we've reduced prices 109 times since launch in 2006. In terms of product launches, just last week was reInvent. It was my fourth reInvent being at Amazon. And in 2011, in the first ever reInvent, there were 80 new services and features launched. And in 2020, in the year 2020, the number of launches was 2,700 odd, right? And this includes over 200 fully functional services. And if you look at the hardware, right, and the availability zones, we have 81 availability zones now in 25 regions across the world. And you will see announcements about upcoming region launches as well. It's also the people, right? We have a thriving user groups across the world. We have communities, we have partners. In fact, we have more than 100,000 partners, 70% of which are outside of the US. And yeah, I think it's if you ask me, it's still early days in the cloud. Things are still evolving, things are still improving. And like sustainability is like something that we've been speaking about quite a bit, and AWS has committed to and it's on a path to reach 100% renewable energy by 2025. So it's very much still evolving and in that process. So I'd love to see where it goes in the next few years.
Sure. I mean, those are very insightful comments. I would like to ask Rob, as an advisory firm with ISG closely following this space, How has the perception of cloud adoption changed, among enterprises over the years? As Sohan mentioned, cloud providers are ensuring better availability, higher security, sustainability, and better range of cloud services. How do you see this space evolving from an advisor point of view?
No, so thank you. Great question. And really, Sohan really tabled it really, really well because we see the same thing. Just as short as 2014 is where we really saw the industry change from an ISG perspective. Data center outsourcing was roughly a $2 billion business for the service providers. And that's declined over time. So as of 2020, it has gone from a $2 billion industry to roughly a $1 billion industry from our data points. And on the public cloud side of the house, it has grown from a just below $1 billion to a $6 billion industry today from an IaaS perspective. So tremendous growth has occurred since 2014. And so we're now looking at $7 billion, over $7 billion from an ISG perspective of spend that is occurring on infrastructure as a service, be it traditional data center outsourcing or in the public cloud. That's huge growth in and of itself. The amount of infrastructure spend from just 2014, $5 billion of growth. So the industry as a whole is just growing with tremendous growth. And clients are looking for, and Sohan was so spot on, one of the things that clients are starting to now ask us is, how can I free up capital? I need to free up capital and move it into expense because my business needs to invest in itself. Sustainability is another key component. There's a number of key energy companies that have got active investors on their boards now that expect sustainability to be a key objective. So clients are looking for IT as part of that contributor to reducing their carbon footprint. And moving into the public cloud with a firm such as AWS enables that realization and IT to be able to contribute to the core business. So great things are happening. I think that we are still in the early stages of what the cloud potential is. Many companies are on that adventure and have got strategies in place, and they've moved from an IaaS solution to a PaaS solution in the cloud. And there are lots of companies that are suffering still. They're in hyper competitive models, and they haven't been able to make that investment to transform. And so we're excited to look forward to those opportunities, help those clients transform and get into the cloud space and realize benefits for their business.
Thanks, Rob. I want to bring in Jyoti into the discussion as well. Jyoti, as a system integrator, how have you seen the system integrator role evolve in this space? I know, earlier they used to be called as people who used to manage infra used to be called as system administrators or infra personnel. But nowadays, if you look at a cloud personnel, it's more to it, right? They have to manage so many moving parts. There are so many variables within the cloud ecosystem. So how do you see the system integrator role evolve as infrastructure or cloud has itself matured?
Yeah, that's a good question, Pradeep. So the role of an SI is important from various paradigms, right? Now, the first and foremost need is to arrive at the right cloud adoption strategy itself. Um, Nowadays, if you take the need of enterprises, the hybrid cloud strategy has become important for them, right? And hence, taking a neutral approach by knowing the strengths and weakness of each of the cloud, right? And picking the right services and amalgamating that into a solution is very essential, and it completely determines the success of the transformation. Also, as you rightly said, and also as Sohan mentioned, cloud is no longer just an infra platform, right? It offers various PaaS, SaaS solutions in almost every aspect of the solutioning, right from IAM solutions to serverless to search solutions to cache solutions, big data, AI, even streaming, DB as a service, you name any, you would have a cloud offering available, right? Now, just not that, these solutions are pretty much competing head on head with the independent tech solutions and vendors out there, right? And hence, in today's world, a cloud expert team need to be solution experts spanning multiple area, right? From infra to application architecture to big data to DevOps and so on. Hence, SI's role is to bring in that cloud expert team to build a solution considering the needs of the application as well as the assessment of risk, right, of the application is also important. And they play a major role in picking the right solutions from the right cloud as well as from the other vendors, right? So that's one another key role that an SI plays, right? So once its solution is derived, the other thing that an SI also contributes is they become key in driving the entire roadmap for the cloud adoption, right? By, as I said, by assessing the needs and the risks. Now, instead of a big bang approach, a pragmatic transformation is what is preferred. And a cloud expert team is that's coming from an SI is the one that understands the entire landscape and then draws out that migration journey and what's it's going to look for an enterprise.
So it's interesting, Jyoti, that you laid out the landscape of cloud. You mentioned so many services, database as a service. There are platform as a service solutions on cloud. For an enterprise which is new to this concept of cloud, or somebody who understands the benefit of cloud and they want to go on cloud, but they do not know where to start first. How do you how do you simplify it for them, or how do you where do they start their journey? I mean, Sohan, uh, can you dwell on that, please?
I get this question quite a bit, like when I go to like a meetup or something, right? And
Yeah.
I very often basically tell people that, look, as a large organization, this is not a technical challenge for you, right? It is a people and culture challenge. Getting that in and understanding that, I think, is the key. The big difference I see is like large organizations will want to transform and move to the cloud, but taking that step, leadership is not aligned. So I think step one is to get senior leadership well and truly committed to this. Right? I think people recognize that you can have more flexibility, security, performance, reduce costs, all of that stuff. But that change has to happen. And fundamentally, people don't like change. Second is, once that decision is made, there has to be a plan and a very aggressive top-down goal that really forces the organization to change. You can work in a small, like a R&D team within this organization. You can be cloud first and stuff. But if you set the goals for the rest of the organization, it's not going to flow bottom up, right? It has to come top down. So culture always flows from the top, and that's where the change really goes through. And once all of this is in place, I think it's the matter of getting the skills. You need people trained on the cloud. Even if you look at the reInvent keynote from last week, a theme was the fact that even large organizations, even startups, need people really trained on the cloud. And once you have these three things in place, you're well set to actually make this move. The last piece of advice I think I give when it comes to this is, especially as a large organization, it is very daunting, and it sounds very daunting to take your entire workload and sort of move it to the cloud. And I usually say that there's no need to actually do that. There's no need to boil the ocean. You can start with something that maybe isn't as mission critical, and start with migrating that. And that can give you the sort of on-field expertise, so to say, in what can go wrong, in how to plan, how to mobilize your team. And it really informs you what to do when you're moving the rest of your workloads, including the critical things. So really start with the people and go from there.
It's interesting. You said that you also made a very valid point, Sohan, that everybody understands the benefits of cloud, as you rightly said, and probably several enterprises have made those investments into cloud as well. I'm sure every enterprise has an IT budget which is focused at a cloud journey. To Rob, I would want to ask, how do you benchmark a cloud maturity? If somebody has started a cloud journey and they've moved, probably a year back or a couple of years back, how do they benchmark themselves against their peers, or what is best in the industry? How do you have some kind of a model, or how do they do that?
So I think there's not a standard maturity model out there. At least we haven't formulated one just yet. And some of that's because I think we're still in the early stages. We have many what I would say Global 1000 companies that have gone and made that strategic investment, like Sohan talked about, where they were early adopters, they did a cloud first strategy, and they moved aggressively there. There's other companies that the marketing department went and leveraged the cloud because the corporate infrastructure organization wasn't responsive. They couldn't stand up a server fast enough. And the cloud community was able to provide a service and a capability that was rapid and could get that capability in place quickly. So it augmented traditional infrastructure. And we've got some clients that are still trying to think about how do we even get started. Earlier I mentioned about hyper competition. There's a number of industries that are still suffering from hyper competition. Think of our retail brick and mortar firms that are out there that are under tremendous competitive stress. They'd love to get to the cloud. They'd love to go on that journey. However, they can't because of the challenges that they have from a capitalization standpoint. So I think from a industry developing a maturity scale, we got some work to do there. However, one of the things that we talk to clients about is looking at how they're approaching the utilization of IT and really what is it about from a digitization standpoint. And so look at digitizing your business. How are you going to digitize that customer experience enablement? We are currently in a pandemic that is struggling. Our people are struggling to interact the way that they used to and conduct business the way that they used to. And if it weren't for the cloud and all of the technology that's been developed over the past 20, 25 years, we wouldn't be able to work the way that we do today, and our economies wouldn't be where they are today. So one of the things we look at is where are you at from that digitization? Where are you at on that journey? What is your strategy? How are you going to enable that to come forward? And then how does that bring forth the cloud? The cloud is an enabler of a digitization strategy, right? And so that's where the true benefit is. And that's where we coach clients, is to begin that journey and begin that thought process and that strategy up there to augment the people component that Sohan spoke so much about. And it's so important because people have to are the catalyzers of enablement. And technology is another enabler to facilitate making a digitization strategy work. So more to come on the maturity scale. Clients are all over the place in the journey, but more to come.
Sure. To Jyoti, I mean, we talk to customers, different kinds of customers. Some who are completely on-prem, some who have started their journey and they're not very clear what to do. Some who are very mature in terms of their cloud adoption. How do we, engage with different customers? You can probably quote some examples of transformation that we have done. That will help the audience also relate to if they are going through something similar.
Sure. We do have a cloud maturity assessment, but I want to make it clear that cloud maturity of an organization is no way the maturity of that particular technology, right? So it's just one part of it, and it may not even apply to that particular enterprise, right? Having said that, now we do categorize the application with respect to the cloud standards it follows, the cloud benefits that it leverages from, and the best practices that it follows on the cloud. It can be rated from anywhere the lowest, which we consider the lift and shift as, right, to being a cloud native with optimized scale of efficiency and also where the cloud native solutions are adopted in form of infrastructure, your application, or the security needs of that particular application. While it's desirable, not every application needs to be on top maturity, right? And also, it is not practical to aim at that topmost maturity at day one. The maturity factor is also, in a way, affected by the need of an application to be set up in a hybrid model as well, wherein they wouldn't be really allowed to adopt too much of a specific proprietary service offered by that cloud, right? Now, putting all of these in a framework, Aspire has a framework called ACE, which stands for Aspire Cloud Elevator. This defines the various stages of migration or transformation for a specific application depending on its needs, right? Now, this is a little different and a little detailed from the 6 Rs that is available in the industry, right? Just to give you an example, within refactor, which is one of the Rs, right? One could opt for just infrastructure modernization using containerization, right? Or one could opt for only a particular layer of the application being refactored to take benefit from the DB as a service, right? Now, we have seen such cases, right? So when people move while they are refactoring, they are not looking at refactoring as a whole. They are just looking at refactoring one portion and then benefiting from it. Now, that's a little higher than what you would otherwise just call cloud ready, right? So in that model, we have laid down all those options that within the broad spectrum of 6 Rs, and pick the right combination that is best suited for that application. Now, this decision is also based on various factors such as the limitation that the application holds. As I said earlier, on whether it can be fully cloud on a particular cloud, or it needs to be a hybrid cloud, or it also needs to have some deployment on-prem. And also the other important factors, right? Would it really benefit to even adopt a cloud native solution, right? Which is like the lifeline of the application. If it's already in the sustenance phase and you're not going to release it much faster, then you're not really going to make use of certain benefits by refactoring, right? And release and scale needs, right? And if you're not going to anticipate much load, then scalability is not a concern at all, and hence certain services from cloud does not even fit to that application. And risk of re-architecting, this is also very important, right? Now, the while the application may benefit a lot from complete re-architecture or moving to a cloud native solution, there are not going to be much documentation, test cases available, and the risk of re-architecting at that point is also going to be extremely high. And also some other factors come into play, like the DB volume that you have and the message transformations that are going to become critical when you're completely splitting a database into multiple and so on, right? Now, based on these factors, we have a scoring model to assess the app, and then the final score determines what is the level of adoption that is best suited for that application, right? Now, maybe we can just show a glimpse of the various levels. We just call it floors of that elevator, Pradeep, if that's fine. And yeah, and
Yeah,
then I'll just talk to it. Yeah. So if you look at this, right, as I said, you go to the earlier one, it ranges from the lift and shift to pre-host with minor upgrades to being cloud ready, and then the cloud native infrastructure modernization, taking into account only the network security and monitoring layers from cloud, right? And then containerization, you can keep the app as it is, but then if the app fits in for a containerization, you can just containerize it. And then the cloud optimization, right? So taking the code and optimizing it to the scale of efficiency, not so that it's not mandate to be hosted on a certain hardware and one instance and so on. And then also the other application benefits, right? And moving to an open source, right? And if you are, and we are also had cases where um, let's say I have WebLogic and I want to move out of it, right? And then I want to have Oracle, I want to move out of it. We also had cases like that. Now, cloud native architecture, as I said, is probably the second best place where you can be. But then again, the need of the application should justify it. And then end-to-end serverless, right? So that's the highest maturity from a cloud standpoint that you can get. Everything is serverless. You don't really have to bother about anything not scaling, and all the management overhead is um, I mean, it is almost to zero and so on, right? So these are the different levels, but as I said, we assess the need of the application, and the right level is chosen for a particular application in the transformation journey.
Sure. Thanks, Jyoti. I wanted to go back to Sohan. What is your view on being cloud native versus cloud neutral? And there is incidentally there's a question from an audience member as well. Do you see an adoption increase of hybrid cloud or multi cloud with container native as the core? Obviously, there are a lot of customers or who would prefer to have an easy way out, right? I mean, at some point it's also a pricing issue, or in terms of competitive offerings which one provider has to offer vis-a-vis the other. So everybody would like to have an easy exit option. uh, as an advocate of AWS, how do you allay such concerns, if you are an advocate of cloud native, so to speak? Yeah.
Well, to answer your last question, yes, I am an advocate of cloud
Yeah.
native. I'm going to myth bust here, and say that there is no such thing as either a lock-in or committed. That is a very common concern, and it's fair to have that concern because a lot of old guard companies have done this with earlier proprietary software. I think with the cloud, right, and I'm not speaking just about AWS, but with the cloud, there's no such thing as being committed to one. If you look at it, it's only a cost of switching from one vendor to another, right? That holds good even if you're changing your front end from, say, a Bootstrap to React, right? You bake that into your modernization or into your migration plan, that if we have to shift or if there is a way to shift, this would be the cost and this is the time taken and this is what we'll do, right? So that's how I tell my customers and my clients to look at it. The thing that the cloud really provides, apart from all the things that you hear, right? You hear about security, scale, all of that. But what the cloud really gives you is freedom of choice. Unlike in a data center where you had to buy your hardware and you have to estimate and then you're stuck with it, here you have the freedom of choice to move in and out as quickly as you can, and you are charged for what you use, right? And it scales up and scales down depending on your usage. So really look for a cloud provider that makes it easy for you to move in and out. And there are, like, for instance, AWS has services that make it super easy for you to migrate from something to the cloud. So it is never a long-term commitment and you have that full freedom of choice. Most services on cloud and especially on AWS are sort of built on open standards. So again, shifting from one cloud vendor to another is, again, it's easy, right? And there's no upfront commitment or no upfront cost that you're paying as well. So yeah, I can go ahead and answer the viewers question as well. So someone's asked, do you see an increased adoption of hybrid or multi-cloud with container native architecture? So I want to break down that there is a slight difference between the two, right? When you talk about hybrid, you actually mean using the cloud with like your data center or whatever. And there could be many reasons you're doing that, like low latency, data residency requirements, and so on. When you say multi-cloud, you're actually using different cloud vendors at the same time to split your workloads, right? Hybrid cloud is a great way to sort of ease into the cloud, especially if you have these requirements to have like data on premise, whatever. And I would recommend that, especially if you want to go first steps into the cloud. With multi-cloud, there are a couple of approaches, and I think splitting workloads evenly, I've not seen it really work in large companies, only because, well, expertise and all of that becomes a problem, right? You need to build 2 3 entire teams of experts in like different clouds. I have seen companies split their workloads differently for experience, whatever, and with services in AWS like EKS Anywhere, which is container native, you actually get a single pane of glass for container services across different clouds as well, which in a way is multi-cloud. So yeah, there has been some adoption of services like that.
Yeah,
Sure.
to add into
Hope
that,
the
I was going to add
sorry.
in
Hope the
to Sohan that we see the
yeah.
same thing. To answer the audience member question is we're seeing clients adopt a hybrid strategy, particularly clients that have already gotten they're already in their own prem data center, and we foresee them continuing to operate in a hybrid cloud model for periods of time, maybe even 5 to 10 years, just because the ROI is not there to make that investment to change. Data residency issues is also a play in that. The We're seeing startup companies start in the cloud versus even considering an on-prem situation. We're seeing less of containerization. Most of our clients are looking for the solution in the cloud versus trying to adopt something through containerizing it into the cloud. Not to say that the service provider community doesn't see more of that, but from a strategy standpoint, when we're engaged, clients are looking for solutioning into the cloud. So just to augment another perspective to Sohan's viewpoint.
Got it. Rob, just to add a follow-up question, we all agree that cloud transformation is a journey, and it is a long journey as such. So how do you define milestones that hey, I have done this, I'm I'm going in the right track. This is a milestone. How do you you know uh, pat yourself on the back if you've achieved smaller milestones like that? How do you define these smaller milestones?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that, to your point, is transforming into the cloud is a journey, and
Yep.
therefore organizational resiliency is key. Earlier to the discussion we had on people that Sohan talked about how important it is that the people side of the equation is addressed first. So leadership needs to take that on, and then leadership also needs to manage the resiliency of the organization throughout the journey. Experience says 6 to 9 months is about the tolerance level that most organizations can operate their organizations through on a major project with a level of resiliency. So getting that strategy in place is key, right? Getting the right team members in place is key, and then determining your adoption approach into the cloud to realize the benefits. So that dovetails into your digitization strategy. But certainly some of the key phases, if you will, there's, we certainly experimenting in the cloud, that pilot phase, if you will, and then moving into a phase one, as we like to call it, which is a cloud task force phase. Setting out that framework, the commercial, the legal, the platforming, the security, the network, the service management, all the things that Sohan and Jyoti talked about earlier are all keys to making that happen and getting that phase one established. So the thought process, if you will. And then establishing as part of phase two is a center of excellence. We believe that a center of excellence ought to be established, that core competency, that core capability to create that operational capability. The goal is stabilizing, professionalizing, and then scaling the usage of the cloud. And then from there, as phase three and beyond, is the scaling up. Bringing in those other functional domains in a sequenced manner such that the organization as a whole benefits. Is kind of our viewpoint on the stepping stones to a cloud journey.
Thanks, Rob. I mean, the theme of this webinar is obviously, discovery phase. So as an SI partner, Jyoti, how do you articulate or define ROI? If there is a discovery phase, to define this, what would be the objectives of a discovery phase? What are the activities done, and what are the tools used? And there's a question from from a panel member as well, from a participant as well. Is lift and shift to cloud and then modernizing a better option, or do the math? I mean, I'm hoping the math is the discovery phase. Do the re-architect and then move to cloud after considering factors like time and cost, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'll probably answer about, I mean, I'll probably cover the discovery phase and how much time it takes, the tools, etc., ROI, and then I'll answer the question as well, right? So now discovery and solutioning. So we, in other words, when we say discovery, it's both analysis and solution that we are combining, right? It's the most critical phase of any transformation, right? It's the phase where the complete application landscape is studied and the right solution or blueprint for transformation is arrived. Now, in terms of tools, right? So there are multiple tools, right? And one could use set of tools to conduct the discovery. And while it can provide you details such as network dependencies, number of servers, utilization, etc., we strongly believe that workshops involving the right stakeholders is mandatory to understand the nature of the application that we are transforming. At Aspire, we have devised a methodology for discovery, which consists of supporting materials like templates, questionnaires, blueprints, which would be an artifact that a delivery team consisting of various skill sets, which we call as the discovery team, would use, right? And this team essentially consists of various skills like we talked earlier, right? That the cloud expert team. They would have cloud architects, cloud DevOps, solution architects, infra architects, DevOps architects, testing architects, and so on, right? Now, this team then dissects the system from various angles and proposes a phased migration solution, including the phased cloud solution architecture, your data migration design, your application architecture, DevOps, release plan, etc. And to answer the question of how much time a discovery phase takes, for an average or I would say not so complex transformation, it anyway runs to between 3 to 4 months, right? And that's the duration we have generally seen. Now, coming to the ROI of a cloud transformation, right? That there are two aspects to calculating the ROI. One, we need to be looking at the capital cost. In a transformation, the capital cost is nothing but the implementation of the transformation, right? So building that up, as well as any upfront charges you are going to pay for the cloud. If you are adopting any saving plans, wherein you are committing to a certain resource and paying upfront, that is also included as a capital cost. And then the next one is the operational cost, right? Now, the operation cost is nothing but the monthly bill of the cloud that you are going to incur plus the maintenance cost, right? Now, this is weighed against the uh, old systems, the system that is not a transformed, the operation cost of the same, and the maintenance overheads. Now, oftentimes what I have seen is, while calculating the maintenance overhead of the old system, many miss out on the obvious things as the decreased developer productivity, right? And increased testing time, release times, which is going in circles, and hence the maintenance overhead really is high, right? But sometimes I see that in the calculation they somehow miss it out and hence don't get the math right. Now, this all systems operating cost and the maintenance overhead um, needs to at least like break even with the current capital plus operating cost at a certain point in time and over a period of years. And that is the ROA you should be looking at. It's not like year on year, right? Over a period of time, you should be breaking even, and the maintenance overhead calculation for your old system needs to take into account everything that you're doing wrong, and hence you're having to pay more, right? And that would give you the right answer on whether this transformation even makes sense, or what is the level I need to be on for this particular application. And that's how it's calculated. And you're right, this is done during the ROI, discovery stage. Now, coming back to the question of whether should I just lift and shift, or I should architect or refactor and lift and shift, right? It depends on what you really mean by refactoring, right? Now, if you are going to look into the re-architecture and then you are going to move to a cloud, right? You need to ensure that the specific products that are available and or services available in cloud are taken into consideration for re-architecture. Otherwise, if you're just dealing with your on-prem available resources and then doing the re-architecture, there's no point, right? You will have to once again do that, right? So an ideal model would be to consider the re-architecture together, wherein you are as much as possible, right? So that you are cutting down on your testing time, right? And you're doing it once proper with respect to making use of the cloud the best possible way, rather than, I mean, taking a shortcut of not leveraging the cloud, right? So that would be the preference. But again, again depends on, as I said, the risk, right? And if it's not possible to re-architect at this point in time because you lack requirements, because there's not enough test cases, and then there's no other go, right? The safest way is to probably move to cloud using a lift and shift model, and then build whatever is required for re-architecture and then re-architect. I hope I answered that.
Yeah, I think Rob also touched upon it. When he said, whether you containerize and then move to cloud, or move to the cloud and then use the cloud services for content. I mean, Rob, Jyoti also spoke about Capex versus OPEX. So when you are advising to enterprises, how do you advise them? How do what should be the Capex versus OPEX allocation ratio? Is there a formula or thumb rule that one should follow when allocating a budget for this?
Well, so generally, hitting on, let me dovetail in Jyoti's comments around discovery, because discovery is key.
Yeah.
Many times to kind of track down this question a little bit, is many times we've seen clients do a lift and shift in the cloud and just use it as an alternative infrastructure play. And many clients have not been good stewards of utilizing and consuming the cloud because of the elasticity that it brings to bear. So think about clients, what they do is they capitalize a server, and they're going to find a way to use that server up. It's just like when we go buy a house, or an apartment, we're going to fill it up with furniture until it gets to a place to where no more furniture will fit or it becomes uncomfortable, right? So clients want, when they're in the capital model and have a data center and they're buying servers and storage devices, you want to maximize that capital. So it's a different type of operating model, right? From a mentality standpoint, because you have investment there that you want to get an ROI on. And then clients struggle with that cultural change as they move into the cloud. And particularly when their philosophy is, well, I'll just shut down my on-prem, I'll stop buying servers, I'm going to go to the cloud, and immediately think that they're going to save money. And in many cases, if they can manage their consumption and know what do a like for like, that plays out. But the thing is that the cloud is so elegantly spoke about, is it brings that flexibility, it brings that instantaneous capacity. It's by design, right? Because you're enabling your business. So it's important to look beyond what the infrastructure capabilities of the cloud are, because the hyperscalers like the AWS, are bringing so many products and services above that into the PaaS space. That's where the real opportunity is to save money. Is you've got to move yourself up from just looking at infrastructure and looking into business enablement and what can the PaaS solutions that the hyperscalers are bringing to bear. And that's where we look at our clients from a value proposition standpoint. That's where the opportunity is to bring on ROI, and not only just from a cost perspective, because it's not just about dollars, it's about business enablement at the end of the day. And so it's revenue generation. Don't have a ratio per se, because each client is unique and different as to what they're trying to do. And we talked about maturity, and Jyoti spoke so well about it from the Aspire perspective. And therefore a technical perspective. And so where are clients at on that journey? And therefore that generates that opportunity. More to come, obviously, as we look at, as the industry begins to, because we're not at that commoditized level of PaaS. As it commoditizes, there'll probably be some rules of thumb around what should the ratios be. But right now, what we're coaching clients on is looking at where they're trying to go with their business and how the cloud can enable that. That's where the value proposition, it's not just a pure savings play. It's about revenue and business growth. Savings is a backside opportunity from a like for like perspective. And that's really not what the cloud brings to the table.
Got it. I mean, I want to go back to Sohan, right? What do you think, are the factors, or what should be the considerations in a strong cloud solution when you do this discovery? How is there a checklist, or how do enterprises ensure that they have considered all the variables and into the solution? Is there a metric that you would have in terms of measuring what a good cloud solution is?
Yeah, I don't think there's like a hard or straight up metric. I think between what Rob and Jyoti and yourself spoke about, we spoke about some of these things, right? You want to look for a cloud provider that has the depth and breadth of functionality. It's not just about storage, or it's not just about compute. It's so much more nowadays. You want to see if it keeps up with pace of innovation. I think tech is moving at such a quick pace. You want to make sure that your cloud provider is keeping up, or maybe even defining some of those innovations. One thing that's super important, I feel, is looking for maturity. The CEO of Amazon, who used to be the CEO of AWS, Andy Jassy, he often says there's no compression algorithm for experience, right? So you need to look for a cloud provider that has been there, done that over the years, and has really seen scale. At the same time, every app or every business now wants to go global, right? No one is enough saying, hey, I just want my 50 users, or I just want it for my 20 employees. Everyone wants to have this global impact. So you need to look for a cloud provider that actually gives that to you. And at the same time, with all of this, you want your security, you want your resilience at a very low cost. So there are a lot of factors that actually come into play when looking at a cloud solution. And I think all of these are the ones typically people look at. Since you're specifically speaking about discovery and migration today, also maybe look for a cloud solution that gives you flexibility to move in and out of the cloud, right? We spoke about how if you want to be neutral, or if you want to maybe move from on-prem to cloud. So those small steps also matter, right? You need to look at all of this. And lastly, goes without saying, but you also need to have the talent and the skill, or a way to upskill your team to actually do all of this eventually, right? So maybe your team already has a skill in a certain cloud provider. So it might make sense for you to go all in on that if you already have the employees to do so. So yeah, I think it's a factor of all of this. So good luck. Not a straightforward decision, but yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Obviously, I mean, Jyoti, I think you were earlier talking about discovery phase and the activities that go into discovery phase. But what are the typical outcomes, right? You've embarked on a discovery phase. You mentioned, it can be anywhere between 3 to 4 months. What are the typical outcomes of a discovery phase? What will be the deliverables, and how does the future look like? How does the paths evolve from an implementation standpoint?
Yeah. See, this discovery and solutions deliverables are plenty, but in if I have to summarize, right, so there are three very important outcomes of it. The first one is to draw the release plan, right, or the complete roadmap for your transformation. The release plan is something like what is going to go first and how is it going to go, right? The timelines, the dependency, and it's arrived based on three factors, right? The dependencies, the risk associated with it, the priority, right? So these three typically determine now what applications needs to be moved first, and then the blueprint for each of the applications transformation. Now, when I say blueprint, it's typically the different architectures that represent the interim and the target state of the application. And that's going to be from multiple viewpoints again. Now, how is the application architecture going to look in the interim, in the target, right? How is the deployment going to look in the interim, on the target, and DevOps going to look, and so on, right? So that is what we call as the blueprint. Now, the third very important, output is also, outcome is also the migration strategy, right? Now, the migration strategy is if I move from my old state to the new state. Now, what are the impacts I'm going to have throughout? Of course, I'm taking my application and moving it, but then I need to study the impact of the data migration. The data again could be transactional data, static data. What is going to happen to my external systems that I have integrated with, right? So the migration strategy is also very, very important in drawing out the transformation, and that's a very important outcome as well. So in a nutshell, the overall release plan, every solution blueprint within that, spanning across multiple viewpoints, as you can see in the slide. This is a typical deliverable that we come up with as well, right? Application architecture, database architecture, cloud DevOps, testing strategy for each of the applications, and finally the entire migration plan, taking into account multiple things like data integration, static data, and so on. So that would be the outcome from discovery.
Thanks, Jyoti. I think we will stop here. We will throw the floor open to the participants. Please do send in any questions that you have. We'll be taking questions for the next 10 to 15 minutes or so. I see a question addressed to Rob. What, according to you, are barriers that enterprises find when embarking on a successful cloud strategy?
Barriers. Okay, so technology and talent debt can be a barrier, and usually when you have those two, it's a result of business conditions that created them, right? So I've created a situation, now I need to get out of it. And that requires investment. So the ability to invest can be, if you don't have the ability to invest, they can be a challenge or a barrier. Data center real estate. Lots of firms want to free up capital that's wrapped around real estate, but sometimes you can't unload that real estate. Now, many of the hyperscalers, and AWS is one that is willing to assist clients with being able to deal with the real estate that becomes available as a result of migrating to the cloud. So clients ought to look at the real estate play as not necessarily a barrier, but an opportunity to partner with one of the hyperscalers, because they may have solutions to assist them. Hardware and software licenses, Jyoti kind of hit a little bit on that earlier, can be a barrier because there's a cost that you may have to incur on both on-prem as well as up in the cloud in order to migrate. Again, your partners will be able to help you with that. So don't look at that necessarily as a barrier, because a partner may be able to help you with that migration. Don't be afraid to have that conversation with your software partner. If you talk to them about how you're going on a journey to migrate from your on-prem to the cloud, they will typically work with you to help you make that transformation happen. Of course, there's going to be some constraints. One of them is usually time. So you can't take 5 years to make that transformation. and a software vendor accommodate you on that. If you've got a good plan, as Jyoti kind of articulated in the discovery and having that strategy and that timeline and plan as part of discovery to complete that journey to migrate, software houses will work with you on that. Upskilling of people. So, we're quickly moving to low and no code environments, particularly on the infrastructure side of the house. And so many cases, clients' personnel are focused on operating a data center. So they have personnel that are trained on facilities management, things like power and cooling. What happens to those individuals going forward? So we need to upskill those folks. Again, your partners can help with that by putting an upskilling plan in place with those individuals so they migrate from where they are today in their career and advance their career. Many times I've been in conversations with clients where I just can't get my people to move off of old technologies. Database, we're still running quite a bit of DB2 still sitting out there, believe it or not. And clients come to us and say, we really need to get our people convinced to move. Well, there's cultural change there. Jyoti and so both talked about that earlier about people and how we need to look at culture and make cultural changes. People need to recognize that while I've been a database engineer for DB2 for the last 20 years, there are wonderful opportunities out there to move to other technologies and grow your skills. Again, these look like barriers, and clients look at them as challenges to overcome. And they are challenges that need to be overcome. The interesting thing is they can be overcome.
Great. Thanks, Rob. That was quite detailed. We started with Sohan. Maybe we'll have Sohan, the last question for Sohan. Somebody has asked, since you are part of AWS, what do you think are the top 5 Amazon Web Services, PaaS services? Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no top 5 as such, and I don't want to play favorites, of course, but I can mention a couple of the services that are very popular, and I also like using them. So, of course, with platform as a service, you don't have to worry about underlying infrastructure, right? And there are serverless services where the idea is it's not like there are no servers, but you don't have you don't have to have the trouble of actually managing and maintaining a server. So when it comes to compute, for instance, AWS Lambda is very popular. It can scale. It's completely event driven. It's completely pay as you go as well. Also, personally, one of my favorite services. There's also Fargate, which is a serverless compute engine, but for containers, right? So that's in the compute space. In the storage space, there are, of course, you've heard of S3, which is one of the oldest, the second oldest, if I'm not mistaken, AWS service. There's also DynamoDB, which is a key value database, again, used by a lot of companies that want, hyperscale and so on. When it comes to application integration, there are a couple of popular, PaaS services out there. There's SQS, which incidentally is actually the first ever AWS service. So Amazon Simple Queue service. There's also Simple Notification service and API Gateway, among a few others as well. And finally, I think if you want to implement your whole CI/CD pipeline, you have your code build, code deploy, and those suite of services which help you with your CI/CD services. So I think these are the popular ones when it comes to platform as services. And I think it's a theme that we're seeing over the last few years, right? And if you see the keynotes as well, that a lot of companies are going serverless first or PaaS first only for this reason, where you can focus on your core business use case and your code and your customers. And you don't have to worry about all this infrastructure stuff that people 20 years ago used to worry about.
Right. On that note, I think it ended on a quite positive note. I hope the session was informative and all of you had some takeaway or the other. Thank you all for joining. Until next time, bye. Bye from every one of us. Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.